The diner was nearly empty that night, the smell of coffee and fried food hanging in the air. A man in a crisp suit sat at the corner table, staring at his wallet, his face pale. He had ordered more than he could finish yet. When the bill came, his hands trembled. His cards were missing. The waitress noticed his unease. She had served him all evening with a smile, though her own shoes were worn and her apron frayed. She walked over quietly, saw the panic in his eyes, and before he could speak, she slipped the bill from his hand. "Don't worry about it, sir, I've got this." He blinked, stunned. "What do you mean?" She forced a small smile. "You look like you've had a hard day. I can cover one meal." She paid from her tips. Money she had counted earlier for rent. Her chest ached as she watched the register light up red with the deduction, but she didn't show it. She only set the receipt on his table and said softly, "Enjoy your night." He tried to protest, but she was already moving on to another table, humming as though nothing had happened. The man sat frozen, the untouched plate in front of him growing cold. His world was built on deals and wealth. Yet that night it was a waitress with nothing to spare who showed him a generosity he couldn't buy. The next morning she walked into the diner tying her apron like always, but stopped short when she saw him again. This time he wasn't in the corner booth. He was standing at the counter with an envelope in his hand and a look that told her her life was about to change. She froze the apron strings dangling in her hands as the man turned to face her. His suit was sharper today, his posture commanding, yet his eyes softer than she remembered. He held out the envelope, but didn't let go of it right away. Instead, he said quietly, "You thought I couldn't pay last night. But the truth is, I wanted to see something I hadn't seen in years. Kindness without a price." Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her face. She laughed nervously. "Sir, if this is about the meal, it was just a plate of food." He shook his head firmly. "No, it was dignity. You gave it to me when I pretended not to have any." He opened the envelope and slid it across the counter. A thick stack of papers rested inside her name, printed in bold. At the top, she blinked, her lips parting. "What is this?" His voice steadied. "A full scholarship and a contract. If you want it, you'll never carry another tray unless it's by choice. You'll study on my dime, and when you're ready, there's a position waiting for you in my company." Her throat tightened, her hands trembling as she stared at the papers. For a moment, she thought it was a cruel joke, but the sincerity in his eyes silenced her. "Doubt," she whispered. "Why me?" His reply was simple. "Because you gave when you had nothing, and I've spent too long surrounded by people who take when they have everything." The diner buzzed around them, but in that moment it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. She clutched the papers to her chest, tears brimming as she whispered, "I only wanted to help." He smiled faintly. "And now it's my turn." Her co-workers peeked from the kitchen doorway, whispering as she stood frozen. At the counter, envelope pressed to her chest, the rich man turned slightly so the whole diner could hear his words. She thought she was paying for a stranger's meal last night, but in truth, she bought herself a future. Gasps rippled through this small crowd of regulars sipping coffee and flipping newspapers. A trucker at the corner muttered under his breath, "Lucky girl," but even he smiled wide as he watched. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope again, scanning the bold letters that promised tuition housing and a guaranteed career. Waiting at the end, she lifted her gaze to him, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I deserve this." His eyes softened. "You didn't wait to decide if I deserved help. You just gave it. Sometimes that's all the world needs to change." He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough for her to hear. I could have paid for that meal 10 times over, but what I couldn't buy was your honesty, your heart. That's why I'm here. The diner had fallen silent. Every pair of eyes glued to her, waiting to see what she would say. Her knees felt weak, but her chest lifted with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, she whispered through tears. Then I accept, but only if you let me earn it. He smiled for the first time. Wide and genuine deal, he said, extending his hand. She slipped her trembling hand into his, and the entire diner erupted in quiet applause. The trucker banged his fist on the counter. A mother at a booth wiped her eyes, and even her co-workers clapped from the kitchen doorway. The waitress stood in the center of it all, her cheeks wet, but her smile shining through like dawn, breaking after a long night. The man released her hand and placed a smaller envelope on the counter. This is for now, he said. Simply inside was a check enough to clear her debts, cover rent, and keep food on the table until school began. She gasped, covering her mouth. Sir, this is too much. He shook his head gently. It's not charity, it's investment, I mean. Betting on you. Her chest swelled as she held both envelopes close, feeling the weight of a future she had never dared imagine. The man glanced around the diner, then back at her, his voice steady. For years, I thought wealth was measured in numbers, but last night you taught me that it's measured in moments. One small act of kindness can change everything. Tears blurred her eyes, but she didn't look away. She whispered, "Thank you not for the money, but for seeing me." He smiled warmly. "You paid for my meal with what little you had. I'm paying for your tomorrow with what I have." That's how the world should work, and with that, he left the diner, not as a stranger in a corner booth, but as the man who had turned a waitress's quiet sacrifice into a destiny rewritten forever. If this story moved you, share it, so others never forget that one selfless act can rewrite a destiny in ways no one sees coming.